So I am Jean Lilensten. I am a French researcher doing astronomy and astrophysics, and more precisely, I am studying the impact of solar activity on the upper atmospheres of the planets. I work in France. My laboratory is the Institut for Planetology and Astrophysics in Grenoble, and I am co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Space Weather and Space Climate, along with Anna Belhaki, who works in Athens. Many agencies, including European space agencies, were wondering whether or not to invest in space weather. So we made studies, and at the end of those studies in 2005, I created the first European network in order to gather this community. It was under the umbrella of the European Commission. And from that time, I knew that we had different goals, excluding science. Science is always a goal, but in order to exist as a discipline, I was convinced that we needed European Space Weather Forecast Center. We needed a European meeting, but we also needed a European journal. It took a long time to create the journal because we wanted to have the support of the whole community. It is a small community. So I wanted to make this journal a community creation, a community thing, where people from the community like to write and to exchange. And then I also needed to have a good publisher. So I met with different publishers until I met with EDPS, where I found this same idea that the most important was to support science. And when we had this enthusiasm within the space weather community and a publisher, it was time to create the journal. No decision should be taken by only one person, and it should always be the result of discussions. When we receive a submission, the first thing is that 3 of us read it. If it is in a topical issue, then we have a topical editor-in-chief, and that's the 4th person to read the submission. And we discuss. Is this paper good? Is it worth a review paper? Should it be sent back to the author for small changes or for a major revision? Or should it be rejected right away, and so on? And we discuss until we reach an agreement. And then, if we are hesitant still, we send it to one of the editors in the editorial board. So we have a next assessment, and we discuss with this more specialized editor. And the editor can say also, no, we reject it. If we all agree, then it is sent to a review process. So you see, it's a multiple stage process. And then, of course, it follows the regular review process with reviewers and corrections and so on. At the end of the process, the associate editor sends to my co-editor-in-chief, Anna Belhaki, and myself, he or she sends a recommendation. This paper should be accepted, for example. When it is accepted, I always go through the last version of the paper. I do a last analysis, and I send an acceptance letter to the author with a small personalized paragraph telling why I liked this paper and why we are proud to publish it. And this way, we start to establish a direct relationships between the authors and our editorial board. And when a paper is rejected, I always try to find good things in the paper that would help the author to resubmit something which would have chances to be published. So we always try to be positive with the authors and create direct links with them. We don't use the word space weather, but space meteorology. Meteorology is a discipline. So it means that space weather has 2 aspects. One is a phenomenon, and one is discipline methodology. So naturally, we have 2 kinds of papers. One kind of paper is pure science, and one is technical articles. technicals because those papers will describe a new technique to make measurements or a new way to process data and so on. We'll of course also look for review papers, and we published, for example, review papers on planetary space weather, which expands the space weather to all the planets. So those are the basics. Now we are also creating a new section of the journal, which will be called the Agora, where we will include outreach and education paper. We will include paper on history, and we already have a 1 century history, and that's very interesting because 1 century ago we knew nothing about the space environment. We will also include discussion and polemics or discussions about books or reports about meetings or about projects. So this new section will be for us a discovery, but we will seek for new kinds of papers. Are about plagiarism. I am still very surprised that some authors dare to do plagiarism. We have very easy softwares to check for plagiarism. It's ridiculous. However, when we do a comparison between a submission and the full literature, if we find 20% overlap, we consider that the author has done a good job in doing a good bibliography. So it is not that we just reject papers where there is a few sentences common with other papers. Of course, if we find 50 to 60% of overlaps, then we know that there is a plagiarism, and it's very easy to check. Those papers are rejected right away. Then it happens that some papers lack maturity. The authors just downloaded some data from the web and went through with very easy ways to analyze data. They need some more maturity. Anytime it happens, I try to help the authors with my pool of editors, and we give advices. Please look in this direction, take those data, look at this instrument which is in your country, and so on, so that the papers and the work become more mature and they are able to submit a successful paper. And of course, we reject paper when there is obvious errors in the papers, and our reviewers are very good in finding errors. And finally, sometimes papers are rejected because of lack of novelty. Altogether, it means that we reject about 45% of the submissions in the regular issue. In the topical issues, the rate is a bit less than 20% because then the topics is more focused and the community is smaller, and very often the topical issues are the effect of some meetings where people were working all together, and so it is normal that the rate of the rejection is smaller. So, but in the regular issue, just based on those. Yes, quite often young researchers are very excited about the fact that they understood many things during their PhD and they want to share those things. And so they write their first paper like a textbook. Unfortunately, most of the colleagues already know those things and they don't need a textbook. They need a paper with results and new features or a method or something new to understand. So my first advice would be, please don't write a textbook. You can refer to the books you've read during your PhD, but don't try to reproduce all the things that you discovered and go directly to your results. Of course, you must quote your colleagues, you must do a good bibliography, but you don't need to explain everything that is written in others' papers, and then you show how you improved the previous work. The main don't I have is don't do plagiarism. We have very good tools to detect plagiarism. Don't do that. Then you will be blacklisted, not officially blacklisted, but your reputation will suffer a great deal if you do such things. Don't do plagiarism. Just quote your colleagues. That's very important. Be fair with the others' works. And also, if you are aware of others' works, quote them, cite the others. It's very important that you show that you've read the literature. Don't try to hide that other colleagues already did something that you are trying to do. Then there is another advice that I would like to give. If you don't understand something that you've discovered, some data, some results that you had comparing data with a model, just don't try to hide or to invent fake things. If you don't understand, you can tell it. You can say, I did this and this to check that and so on, and this assumption, it does not work. I don't know why, but it's something interesting. I tried everything I could, it does not work. But show it. Don't try to hide your ignorance. Very often, being ignorant is very important to make science progress.